Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Woo!
Directed by Edgar Wright, didn't quite hit it big at the box office upon release, but has since been celebrated as a cult classic. Featuring Michael Cera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and Kieran Culkin, Wright crafted this innovative film in Toronto with a budget of about $85 million, masterfully blending comic book aesthetics with indie film sensibility. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Mate Night podcast, where we are ranking every film ever made.
Hi there, Dave.
Today we are breaking down this visually arresting marvel. We'll be debating overall alternate endings, discussing the journey of popularity and success, and comparing it against some of Edgar Wright's other works. So strap in, strap on, and let's kick things off with our rating round. Fred, how do we rank Scott Pilgrim versus the World against some of the greatest films of all time with only 12 minutes on the clock starting now? I'll tell you how.
Well,
We're going to give our gut reaction scores and review the film spoiler-free. Then we are going to determine the final total ranking using the patented secret Mate Night formula, which, as everyone knows,
is never wrong.
has never been
Never
wrong before.
defeated.
On the count of three, our scores based solely on enjoyment.
Yep.
Subjectivity galore. I'm counting you in. Ready?
Me first.
3, 2, 1, go.
8.7.
8.4.
Whoa, let's go.
Can I just say, right? What number does that say there?
Ooh.
I put 8.8.
8.8.
I wrote down beforehand. I was like, I'm going to guess Fred's score.
Oh, right. Okay. I was thinking yours maybe went
No,
up
I'm
there.
8.4.
Okay, cool.
But I was like, what's Fred going to guess?
Love that you're 8.4. When now, we have both watched this before. I'm pretty sure I showed you it, and you were middling.
Kind of here nor there a little bit.
But 8 is great, as everyone knows.
Yes.
8.4 is a stellar film, so
Yeah.
talk to me.
I tell you what really blew me away this time was I understood just how adventurous in a good way the editing was. It was so exciting. Like every single 30 seconds was just like There were like if it was a phone conversation, there were two people on the screen. One of the other things as well, in addition to that, was that it has $85 million budget, and it felt understated in all the right ways. But then when it needed to, the CGI and the special effects and everything actually felt really high budget in a really good way. Yeah. And I just thought it worked so well.
Yeah, there are examples without going in. I mean, it's very minor spoilers, to be honest, but there are examples of really well done practical effects, which will have obviously saved a bit on that front. And by skimping in those areas, as you say, some of the major CGI fights and sequences do really live up to not only the budget, but also the aesthetic of the comic / video gamey vibe. It really is like. Well, how much do you know about the history of video game films?
Not very much.
Well, I can't pretend I'm an expert, but I do know that it is like miss after miss after miss.
There was a Hitman one, right?
Hitman. What's the one which has Hadouken in? You know, there's two Street Fighter or something. Street Fighter. I think.
Have they done a film of that? Have they?
Yeah.
Right.
And
okay.
like, they have been terrible throughout the years.
Okay.
Was it Resident Evil maybe has had one as well?
You know what? Yes.
Yeah, and like panned.
Sonic?
The Warcraft one recently, which didn't do that well. Sonic, I think,
okay.
did all right.
But they had the whole thing with the Uncanny Valley face. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So this actually came out at a time where no video game films, don't do well, and it isn't from a video game; it's from a comic book originally.
Yes.
However, it really does justice to like interpreting a video game onto film and making it work for me.
It really worked. Yeah, it was so good. I tell you, one of the interesting. We're not going to do it as a segment, but it was an interesting thought that occurred to me was, does this style of editing, in particular visually, but just broadly, could you ever make a serious film, a not comedy, with this style of filmmaking? Would it work?
Well, his visual style is so idiosyncratic, isn't it? Edgar Wright, I mean.
So the Cornetto trilogy doesn't use any of this comic book stuff, right?
No, but like the quick cuts and the visual jokes, the gags.
Okay.
It almost is an enhanced version of that. It's basically, I always viewed it as a bigger budget version of the jokes that he likes making anyway.
Right, I get that.
And I think
feel
it's
that.
actually the best. We'll go into it a bit when we discuss where it stacks against his best work.
Yeah.
But in terms of visual comedy, at least,
Yeah.
I think it's right. I would probably say up there as the best.
Yeah.
Because he's just really having fun with it and playing about with the
Damn
gags,
right.
with the edits. But it is an extension of what he already does. That's his style.
Right. Yeah.
And it always has been since Spaced.
It worked so well.
Yeah, and it's perfect. It's almost like he had the perfect setting for this.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know how much you know about the production of this, but everyone was so excited about it. Like the marketers at Universal were really gassed to have someone as exciting and innovative as Edgar Wright doing a film that basically let him run free. And all the cast have said it's like their favourite film they've ever worked on.
Right, okay.
And they've had an email chain going since it finished, which they still talk on.
That's cute.
And it just didn't do well critically. It's not critically, commercially. It just didn't do well. It just came and went.
Okay. And I have a bit of a theory on this. Is I think that we are a good target market for this style of film, but I can see members of my family not just not liking this, but really not getting it, like really not getting it. And in several areas, the visuals, but also the humor, for example. Humor can be very, like, one thing that you might find the funniest thing ever could be not funny at all to somebody else. And I reckon that there is I can see why it's become a cult thing. Do you know what I mean? I can see a lot of people I know saying, I just don't get this film at all.
We'll talk about what makes a cult film a bit later, but something that I am going to bring up there is how I'm trying to word this right. It needs to have an element of being esoteric and being something that not everyone can get involved in. But those who do appreciate it even more for that, because it speaks to them. Yeah. And this does that. I mean, you feel like, because you're so bought into the style of story, jokes, and presentation, and cast, and everything you like about this film, also everything I love about this film, that you forgive it for any problems that it does have, which it does, in my opinion, have a few, but I have to work for finding them, because I'm so, it speaks to me so much.
Okay, so 8.8 obviously is 8.7. 8.7, sorry. Mm-hmm. It's still very, very, very high, but it's not the highest you've done.
Yeah.
What were those things that kind of stopped it from?
So this going into, I said to you, let's do Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Yes.
I don't even think I'd need to rewatch it, and I know what my score was.
Oh, okay.
What do you reckon?
It went down?
It did go down.
Yeah. Okay.
Any ideas as to what you think it might have got into?
What it might have been before?
Yeah. Did you have any ideas when I said I know what score I think I'll give it? What were you thinking?
Well, I guessed 8.8 for you.
Yeah.
And I was teetering above that because I know that this film is important to you.
Yeah.
But it's insanely rare for a film to break 9 for us. Like, we've watched some of the greatest films of all time for this, and they still don't often break 9. And so I was like, I can see Harry putting this just short of the Fred. Sorry for anyone listening.
9 is a real kind of. Yeah, that's
we got like Jaws
above
ceiling.
it.
I don't even know if a gut reaction got above 9 for Jaws.
Jaws just got 9. Yeah. Well, the rewatching it, I thought, okay, there are a few things wrong that I do forgive this for. So, pacing and not really pacing, climax, I'd say. So, without going too much into the plot, for anyone who hasn't seen this, I would thoroughly recommend you watch it.
Absolutely.
If you like kind of indie out there comedies which are atypical, let's say, or you just want to try some, just watch it.
Willing to experience. It's different. You got to know going in. It's
definitely
different, but I would recommend it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that up to a certain point in the narrative, it is exceptional. Like, they set up a concept. Yeah. It's a pretty easy. So he's versus the world. He's fighting a series of people.
Yeah.
And up to a certain point, I think it's hit. It's unbelievable.
Oh, okay.
And then I think the last one or two not that it's rushed, but it kind of feels like it's dragging a bit at that point.
Yeah, it loses a bit of impact, doesn't it?
I actually said that it both felt like rushed and dragging at the same time. Like,
yeah,
it just feels like, okay, and that the ending is a tiny bit anticlimactic, not just for the whole final fight sequences, but then they do like a subverted expectations final opponent, which is a bit of a wet fart at the end. Then thematically, so I felt like there were kind of mixed messages. So the self-respect and there's kind of a theme of having your own, personal change, personal growth.
Yeah.
Which felt maybe a bit not out of the blue.
It wasn't that set up though.
No, he can't. They do an all right job of it, but they don't do an exceptional job of it. So that's what
8.7.
Yeah, for sure.
To reiterate,
Still good.
We're going to work on qualitative descriptions broadly, but 8.7 is very, very high.
Yeah,
like we don't often give those out. But the ending did fizzle out a little bit, I think. Yeah.
And then finally, so I've put audience appeal. We mentioned how it can be, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And I found myself forgiving things. So like certain lines or certain dialogue bits, which I was like, that's brilliant originally, and really I'm like, that's not that good.
Okay.
I just think because there's so much that's amazing about this, that I will think that the sun shines out the arse of every part of this film. And that's not the case.
Yeah.
So it did mark it down a tiny bit.
Some of the things that the sun does shine out of its arse for, soundtrack.
Unbelievable.
Quality. That Black Sheep song, I've listened to it. I think I probably listened to about I watched this film yesterday, and I've listened to the Black Sheep song, which Brie Larson's character sings.
And her version is
so cool. I mean, both versions are just unbelievable. And I've listened to that probably 10 times. I thought that the editing wasn't just visually interesting, but actually it was, from the minute the film started to the end, at the very least, it was so energetic and dynamic. Like every single 30 seconds, it was just moving around. It was just jumping about.
Yeah.
It felt really, really energetic. Michael Cera, we said this on the Superbad episode.
Casting across the board.
Chris
for this
Evans is
quality.
I'll tell you what I was thinking. I never really appreciated how Chris Evans does Goody Two Shoes, Captain America, and then deadpan comedy Scott Pilgrim, and then there was something else. Oh, like the Knives Out kind of like smiley background. I was like, you know what? None of them really blew me away, but they are quite different to each other.
Yeah. He's just like great at it. Just makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, whatever he's doing.
Yeah,
men want to be him, women want to be with him.
Yes, exactly. Romance story. Okay, I'm not going to spoil anything at all, but the ending did feel a bit confused to me.
Yeah.
We will go into that later in the episode if you're interested, but there is a specific reason for that, and I wondered whether maybe I noticed it a lot more. I notice a lot more now that we do this podcast than I ever used to.
Yeah.
But I did wonder if maybe I just felt like it was confused because I was aware that there was actually some confusion around the ending in the production. And so when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, I can see that. Because I don't remember noticing it before. But equally, it did feel like whatever caused me to notice it, it did feel confused at the end.
You know what? Here's what I think. Because a lot of our gripes seem to be basically the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
20 minutes, half an hour. The film is 2 hours long. This could be one of those 90-minute belters, couldn't it?
It could have been.
Like, even the way we speak about the editing and the drive of the film, how it keeps it, like, really high energy. Maybe that even kind of corresponds to it fizzling out a bit. Like, because you do feel like you're like, whoa, next. And then the last one is kind of like, geez, all right, here we go. One more. Let's go on. Let's get hyped. Whereas, if they maybe cut off couple of bits in the middle, even though they're great,
I totally agree.
This could be one of the 90-minute belters of all time.
If we were gonna, we haven't prepared this in tons of detail, but we talk a lot about things that you might change about movies. I feel like maybe the thing that would potentially improve this movie is having a slightly stricter cutting part of the editing process and trying to make this. because you think about the content, the jokes, the whole film, it really does feel like it should be a 90-minute film.
Yeah.
Maybe 100, but like that film feels right at 90 minutes and 2 hours. So I think it's 150, right? I think it's 1 hour 50.
Yeah. But it's like knocking on 2 hours.
You could take a bit off,
take a
and
bit
it
off
would
this.
probably help the film out.
It's one of those white whale, close to perfect films that we discuss.
Yeah, I
It
agree.
just needs a bit off it, and it'll be there.
I often find, for me, Michael Cera is one of those I find really difficult because he's so perfect at what he does, and yet it's so it's just it's just all he ever does.
The typecast,
and I find it kind of difficult to appreciate because of that. Because although it is amazing, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, so he's just doing Michael Cera.
What helps me with Cera is seeing him in external interviews where he is so well spoken and also quite clearly a student of particularly comedy. Like he's got really great British comedy references.
Okay.
So when he spoke about wanting to work with Edgar Wright, he didn't just speak about liking Shaun of the Dead, which is the most popular in the US, but he spoke about Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and Spaced. He's like, I've liked him since Spaced, which is not everyone knows that.
Lesser known.
Yeah, so that, but also if you watch his behind the scenes things, so he was the only one who had any musical knowledge from the cast, so he actually could play the bass, which his character plays in this.
Yes.
Which you sort of wrinkle that you think, oh, that's cool. And also when I used to watch, I obviously love Arrested Development. I always found it funny how he was really hard to break.
Yeah.
You know, some people are just, they laugh.
Well, I broke yesterday, and
break
we're
all the
not even
time.
doing anything that funny.
Yeah, well, I respect him people because I'm so bad at it. But
Yeah.
he is phenomenal, and at that time he was like the youngest cast member.
He was so young.
He was a kid when they did Arrested Development, and yet he's able to basically just hang with these comedic juggernauts, and he's the only one not laughing.
So he is a professional, isn't he?
He really is, yeah. And I think that it's it adds to my respect for him, even though he only.
I love him. I more just mean I think I sometimes maybe I take away from him a little bit in my gut because I'm like
in my soul.
Because you know what I've not seen him play Captain America.
Yeah,
and so
one thing I know we're gonna round off here that I did want to just stress.
Yes,
it's really funny.
Oh yeah.
It is
so funny,
quality, and not just from like the
jumping
dialogue,
out the window scene. Is hilarious.
Like just the whole setup, the whole way it's put together.
Yeah.
Like is hilarious, and one of my favorite films to watch.
Quick question to close off then. Can you think of a film which if you find that funny, then you will find... I mean, any Michael Cera thing probably is a good place to start.
If you find
Team America funny, then you'll find this funny. Or for people, because the humor is amazing, but it's not for everybody. Is there a film which
Grand Budapest Hotel?
Yeah.
Wes Anderson. If you like Wes Anderson.
It's that kind of whimsical humor.
Yeah,
isn't it?
whimsical, sprawling cast of interesting characters.
Yeah.
Even like the side characters are really funny.
Visually
ridiculous
arresting.
scenes, visually arresting. Yeah, this is very much... I've never actually put the two together, but
that's such a good point.
Wes Anderson and Edgar Wright actually have
feel like
quite
if you like the way that the characters talk, the humor... Yeah, I totally agree. And I tell you what, we haven't done Grand Budapest, but I reckon it'd be up there with Scott Pilgrim for me, easy.
Some of the Monty Python stuff as well.
Yeah, just that really ridiculous humor. Although what I would say is this humor in Scott Pilgrim compared to... I'm specifically thinking about the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Is much more ridiculous. It's much more silly than this, which is still very silly, but almost kind of a bit more. I came across a word, was it sophomoric or something like that? Ooh. And it basically meant like, I've butchered that, so apologies to anyone listening, but the meaning of the word is just like childish humor, basically. And it was a comment on Reservoir Dogs where they were like, oh, big dicks, ha ha ha.
Right.
It was a bit of a critique of that.
Yeah, okay. So what I would say in line with that point is something like the Monty Python jokes can be really they can really disassociate from the plot of the story, whereas the jokes in Scott Pilgrim generally are supposed to drive the plot forward.
I would agree with that.
It's more like the Family Guy cutaway gags sometimes in Monty Python,
Yes.
whereas in this it's a bit more kind of South Park story based.
Okay, well, we've slightly overrun, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the 8.7, the 8.4 into the patented Mate Night formula,
Never wrong.
which you're not gonna know about unless you're listening to the long form.
Secret.
No, but we will put the 8.7, the 8.4 into the Mate Night formula, and we will come out with a score which you will agree with. If you do, like and subscribe. If you don't, let us know in the comments.
Nice.
We're
We're going to just
we'll see
go
you in a
away.
minute.
We're going to go away and come back with a number that most all of you will agree on. See you in a bit.
Everybody.
All right.
Okay, let's
All
go.
right, let's
Plot.
blast it. Plot. I'm thinking 8 or
Yeah,
9.
I was thinking 8
8.
because our main gripes were plot,
Yeah.
even though it was a good driving.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. True. All right.
Character.
Any reason why not a 10?
I would say that the reason that it should get a 10 is because there are quite a lot of good characters. Like, it's not just one good character. A lot of them are quite funny. Oh, the bad guy at the end.
I think he's a bit of a step down, Gideon.
Oh, yeah, massively.
9.
Yeah, okay, cool. Dialogue.
10?
Yeah. Comedies tend to do well, and I think it makes sense, right?
Oh,
And again, performance. Maybe the Gideon one, I don't know.
I'd say a 9. For
God, this is going to do well. But
Yep.
I agree with it all. Visuals. Okay, was it?
Was it groundbreaking?
Yeah, that's
Let's
exactly
say 10
what I was
really
thinking.
is. So let's say 10 sets it apart.
So are we happy with 10 on dialogue? Are we happy with 9 on performance with that?
I
sort
think, yeah, 9, visuals, 9.
sound.
See, I don't think 10
Yeah,
because of that same reason.
we like it,
It's perfect for us.
but it's not.
But it's soundtrack, it is songs rather than score. See, I originally was like, maybe an 8 for sound, even though I love it so much.
I agree because it's one of the things that you pointed out to me is soundtrack versus score. And soundtrack is just like, do you like these songs or not? If you don't like the songs, you're not going to like the sound of the song of the movie. So they did a great job of it. And I'd say more to the point, one of the things that we have rated higher in sound before is when they've made it relevant to the plot.
Yeah.
And it is very relevant to the plot. So I think 9 is where my head's at.
All right, and I'm thinking Impact 6 is mixed because it did poorly at the box office, but it's clearly had a cult following.
I like that a lot. Right, okay, so why don't you welcome everybody back?
Welcome back, YouTube audience. We have gone away. We have twiddled some knobs.
He most certainly did not.
poured some chemicals into bottles.
Yes.
And we have used our patented Never Wrong Mate Night formula to determine the final score for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Starting off with an 8.7 out of 10 for Fred's gut reaction. Truly subjective. That's just how much the man enjoyed it. I gave it an 8.4 for the enjoyment.
And then we fiddled some buttons.
Put it in the function. Put it in the Mate Night AI bot that we've programmed.
And what did we get for critical score overall?
8.57 out of 10, which makes it the 8th greatest film of all time.
Until further notice.
That, just for those who are interested, puts it against the other comedies. It actually puts it just behind Team America, which got 8.66 out of 10. I tend to find comedies do very, very well, especially the ones
we do.
The ones that we
Ones
do.
we like.
But it doesn't sound right next to the others, but being only 0.05 out of 10 away from Team America feels right to me. I gave it an 8.4 because Team America got an 8.4 for me, and I was like,
You're right on there.
I enjoyed those two about the same.
I think that we need to do a comedy that's out in the cinema.
Yes.
And really work out.
Yes.
Because we've fleshed out like dramas.
Yep.
And, thrillers.
Furiosa is a bit of a comedy.
Let's not get into that. Right, Furiosa taking stray bullets there.
Thank you so much for listening,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
We'll see you on the next one. Cheers, then.
Bye.
All right, Freddie. So, should Scott Pilgrim have ended up with knives or with Ramona?
Ooh, why do you ask, Jambo?
I'm aware that there was a change in the ending, right?
Yeah.
So in the ending in the film, what happened in the one that has been released?
So spoilers for everyone, of course. In Scott Pilgrim versus the World, it's about a story of Scott versus Ramona Flowers' evil exes, and in the end, he defeats the evil exes and walks off into the sunset with Ramona. That is the film that we all know, some of us love, but as Jambo alludes to there was an alternate ending that was filmed, and you can see on the deleted scenes of the Blu-ray edition, which has Scott coming to terms with the fact that he's changed and Ramona's changed. Same scene, same sequence that happens at the end.
Yes.
Instead, they part ways, amicably but sadly.
Yes.
And he goes off with knives into the sunset. The other direction, different sunset.
Because in the film,
moonset.
he goes off with
moonrise.
Ramona. Yeah.
Moonrise and sunsets.
Yes. And so basically, why did they change it? What was the reason?
Right. So several. I mean, the main reason that is cited is that they put the feelers out for both with early audience screenings, and the general consensus was, let's go with Ramona
I could
Flowers.
not agree more.
Yeah.
He didn't like her. Why would he go with her for the whole film?
I found out about this from I believe it was a What Culture video, YouTube channel, do top tens, kind of like a British Watch Mojo, right? And they said, really, they missed an opportunity here to make a more interesting ending where Scott actually learns about himself and does the right thing, going with knives.
Is it the right thing? He's been shit. I feel like one of the things that they do quite well in this film is set up the whole knives thing in such a way where it's clear that she is just a kid who's kind of in her teenage love and she's not really thinking about it at all. And
Yeah, well, he's too old. He's
too old.
probably too old for her.
He's definitely.
He's also like
She is a bit of a child.
pretty emotionally manipulative.
Yes, yes.
He's a bit of a shitbag, and
Yes.
she's quite a good person.
Absolutely. And I don't care if she's 17. She behaves like a 14-year-old. She is a
Yeah,
child.
yeah.
Like,
And so
it doesn't make sense.
All right,
How is that the right thing?
yeah, okay. Well, let's try and give it some
The right
justice.
thing is to go with the child. What?
Always go with the child.
That's a terrible policy.
What
Ditch that shit now.
what was the point if he went with knives?
What was the point in the whole film?
Yeah, what was the emotional message? No, not like what. I'm not saying what was the point, as in what was the point. I mean, let's try and find a point.
Well, Knives definitely deserved to get what she wanted
deserved
more than
happiness.
Ramona.
Yeah, okay.
Ramona was, like, as a person, like, not really that great.
Yeah,
she didn't really deserve to get anything that she wanted.
Dabbled in being a bitch, as she
Yeah,
said.
and then she came out with a line where I was like, God, I hate it when people say that. And it was like, oh yeah, she just left him at the Chris Evans bit, right? And then he was like, you just left me and then didn't speak to me for days. And she goes, yeah, I do that sometimes. Like, what?
Yeah.
What the fuck do you can't just say that after just fucking leaving someone.
Bang on. But
She's not a good person. Knives deserves to get what she wants.
And you know what? Added to that, Scott Pilgrim's also a shitbag as well.
Yes.
Like, it's alluded to multiple times.
They're
through the film,
perfect for each other.
that he is basically her equal in terms of fucking girls over.
Because there was the drummer as well.
Yeah.
Which we know from the times that they refer to it, he wasn't very good about that whole thing with the drummer in the band.
Oh, yeah, Kim. Sorry, I thought it said the drama. And
No,
I was
the drummer.
Like, which drama? Yeah, so he said that time with Kim. Remember when Aubrey Plaza's character, she's the one who has the, the scene where she swears and it has the black box over it.
Yes.
And she goes through the list of exes whose lives he's basically ruined.
And he comes up with an
culminates
excuse for
in
each
Kim.
one.
He's like, me and Kim are fine. And then turns around and she's staring
like
daggers at him. Yeah, so he does go on a personal growth journey, but so does Ramona, right? By the end, they're both in a position where they're probably better for their experiences in the film, but they're still like He's still not good enough for Knives. Knives is a sweetheart.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. It's all well and good reaching the end of a story and going, I'm going to change. But until we actually see Scott Pilgrim in another situation where he can... I mean, the guy literally cheated on Knives at the start of this movie. Like, he was still with her when he was round in Ramona's bed. Like... Yeah. Okay, fine. You get to the end of the movie and you're like, oh, yeah, okay. I see the problem with my ways. I've changed now. Yeah, maybe till the next time somebody comes along who's really hot and wants you in their bed. Let's see then, shall we, Scott?
Yeah, exactly.
Scumbag.
You piece of shit, Scott.
You deserve each other, you and Ramona.
You're a real piece of shit, aren't you? All right, have you seen the ending?
Not the alternate one, but I did see the end of the movie. Yeah.
You watched the end of the film. What did you think?
I thought I was a bit confused.
To be honest, I think that the problem with the real ending is that it's not. It does fizzle out, not only for the fight, but also their walk off into the sunset to the door, and the music still feels very up in the air.
They didn't set it up well enough, I don't think. You can tell once, especially once you know that there was this whole thing with the alternate endings. It did feel like it was like, literally until he goes off with Ramona.
Yeah.
You're like, what the hell, like, who is he going off with here? Is he going off with either of them? Like, which one am I supposed to want him to go off with? Like, I'm so confused as the audience right now.
So I think that's the thing is, like, you can look back on it and say, you know, I sometimes argue, like, we can come up with ideas, but in practice, you're like, well, that didn't work. But the idea is always more beautiful and it works. Yes. Your imagination runs wild. This is actually a identifiable example where they filmed the alternate ending. We've seen the ending.
Yes.
You might think that's kind of a bit rubbish how they fizzled out that one. Oh, what if he ended up with knives? That's interesting. That's intriguing.
Oh my God, it's
how would they do that?
Come to life.
Yeah. And if you watch it, it's worse.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's also like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just feels weird.
It's confused. I mean, I say it jokingly, but I really mean it. Like, I do think that they didn't know which one they were setting it up. And then what kind of happened is, as the audience, I was like, I don't really know or have a super strong emotional investment in which one of these two he goes off with. Like, I just kind of...
It's also longer as well. So it's the emotional payoff doesn't work. They have this weird conversation. He goes over to Ramona and they're like, right, I guess didn't really work, did it? They're like, yeah, thanks for that though. I've learned. Oh yeah, me, I've grown as well. And then they go off. You're like, what was the point in all of that?
Shit.
Yeah, and then he walks off with knives.
We love this movie.
Yeah,
but that was shit.
Yeah,
what the hell was that?
Yeah, I think just ending generally on this one should have been 90 minutes, shouldn't it?
I tell you, one of the reasons as well that I don't like the ending was it felt like such a disappointment that he had done all this work to beat all these exes, and then they start going separate ways. And I'm like, what was the point? Like, come on. Like, it just felt it felt like we'd wasted time a little bit, you know? I guess I didn't buy Scott's change enough to make it feel worth it.
They were obviously trying to lend credence to the fact that he did it for himself.
Yeah.
You know how it changes from I'm doing it for love to I'm doing it for self-respect?
Yes.
Like, okay, that's a good motivator, I guess. And now they have to be like, no, he really was doing it for self-respect.
Yeah.
Actually, hold the fort. He probably should go with her as well.
I tell you what, it's about both.
Yeah.
and then you're like, as the audience, you're like, what the fuck's going on?
The ending of this movie really is the thing that stops it from being an exceptional film. But what did you think? We've rambled on about how this could have been shorter. Let's cut us off before we elongate this any longer than necessary.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next one.
Lovely stuff. Bye-bye.
Freddie, I know you love Edgar Wright, so we've got Scott Pilgrim, we've got the Cornetto trilogy. Can you just remind me and the audience exactly what the Cornetto trilogy is?
A series of 3 films in the 2000s to start of the 2010s. Simon Pegg, Edgar Wright, Nick Frost.
Unbelievable set of movies.
Unbelievable.
And all of which held very dear to you. And Edgar Wright's Scott Pilgrim also held very dear to you. So I put it to you, Fritz. I want to know where they sit amongst each other for you. What's number 4? What's the worst of the 4?
There is I think 4 is the easiest position.
I'm going to tell you what it is.
I think you'll know, yeah. Go on.
At World's End.
Yeah. At World's End is the worst.
Deservedly bottom.
Which is the only one I saw at the cinema when it came out. So maybe the one that I laughed at the most upon first viewing. Because, when you're in an environment around people, you kind of get,
And there was I can think of one amazing line. I haven't had a drink in 15 years. Oh, well, you must be thirsty then.
Nice.
I absolutely cracked up at that. I never forgot that line.
There's one. The funny thing about that one is Simon Pegg is the comic. He's the comedic character, and Nick Frost is the foil. Whereas in the others, Nick Frost is.
Do you think that works less well?
A tiny bit less well. I think Nick Frost is naturally a bit funnier, and Simon Pegg plays a slightly better straight man.
Yes, which Mission Impossible is a very similar straight man-y sort of role. Have you watched any of those newer ones with Simon Pegg?
Yeah, but he is like the comedic value in Mission Impossible.
True. No, he is, yeah. But he also is...
He's still
he
funny.
Plays his kind of... He's still funny in the other Edgar Wright films, the other collector, but he plays... At World's End, he plays a role that is trying to be funny.
He's supposed to be the funniest character.
Yes.
And he is, I will say, he's clearly a funny character, but
yes,
I think they're not using people to their talents as well as they could in that, because Nick Frost is funnier, I think.
Absolutely justified. So, position number 3. I'm excited. Can I guess again? I'm enjoying that.
Yes, go on.
I feel like you don't know what it is, or you've literally just figured it out.
I just realised we're doing the ranking in this order. I could do 3, yeah.
Okay, you're confident you've locked it in. No changing it to be right.
Before we get on the podium, just to say, there's a fair gap between 4 and then 3, 2, 1 are pretty close.
I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to put. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is tough.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess your top 3. I'm going to go Hot Fuzz 3, Scott Pilgrim 2, Shaun of the Dead 1.
Ooh, all right.
So tell me what number 3 is.
Scott Pilgrim.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was the toss-up.
Tough. I mean, on a different day. The thing is, I'll say this with Shaun of the Dead and the Hot Fuzz are amongst the toughest films I ever rank. Like, when someone asks me what's my favourite, it kind of depends on...
I love those though, yeah.
Yeah, not mood dependent, but maybe where I am in my age dependent.
And how recently you've watched them.
Yeah, because those two films are just incredibly tight. They're the writing is so self-referential, and everything is so purposeful.
Yes.
That you can watch those. They're up there with the most rewatchable films I've ever seen.
So what is the distance between third place, Scott Pilgrim, and the other two?
Well, I hope we get a chance to do them on the podcast. So I won't give the scores I have in mind. Also, my scores would be subject to change rewatching it.
For sure. But just kind of ballpark, is Scott Pilgrim right next to them, or is it quite a confident gap?
So my gut reaction for Scott Pilgrim was 8.7.
Yes.
I would expect both Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead to be, potential 9s.
Yeah. And one of the main things that I think that you have alluded to during the long form podcast, which, by the way, if you're listening, please check it out. The main problem with Scott Pilgrim that we found was the last 20 minutes really were just very weak. Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, they're just strong the whole way through.
Yeah, unbelievable. And I'm not sure which is a better film and which is funnier. I'd say Hot Fuzz is funnier and Shaun of the Dead is maybe better.
So you're ranking them. They're your ranking. Don't tell me number 2 because I'll figure that out. We just go straight to number 1. Who's the winner?
Number 1 is... I've literally changed my mind as I said. Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead!
Shaun of the Dead.
Okay. Why?
Mate, which of your kids do you like more? So I think both of them are not just exceptional comedies, but exceptional films. Like the way that they are crafted. For instance, in Shaun of the Dead, spoilers for both of these, but Shaun of the Dead, there is a sequence where he foreshadows the whole film in a conversation between Ed and Simon Pegg's character, Ed and Sean. And it's through kind of a metaphor of him talking about a drinking binge that they're going to go on. And that drinking binge goes basically scene by scene of all the main points in the film. That is one of a series of callbacks and references that's entrenched in both films. Like both films, you can watch and watch and watch, and you'll be like, I missed that. I didn't see that. You can watch the bonus features on them and find new stuff out about the characters. All characters are so incredibly well fleshed out, and their extended stories of thought beyond what has happened in the stuff that we see within the film. For instance, Dawn's character in Shaun of the Dead, she's the one who saves Dylan Moran's character, her boyfriend.
Yep.
He gets torn apart by zombies, and she goes out, leaves the pub that they're at, holed up, trying to shoot them, with half a leg, and runs out and says, "I'm coming for you, David!" And then she just bashes her way through like the horde of zombies, presumably to her death. But it turns out that she actually climbs up a tree and survives the whole scare. So you don't know this unless you kind of read into it a bit.
Yeah, okay.
So she actually manages to avoid the seemingly
fatal situation.
Hides in the tree with her leg kind of as company. I can't remember if she ends up having to eat the leg or something like that.
Jesus.
But whatever happens, she survives the ordeal, and then she stays in touch with Sean through Christmas cards. Like she's on Christmas card.
Right.
Like that's their relationship.
Okay.
So things like that, well thought out. So in Hot Fuzz, similarly, you've just got like, I think Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, who both write these, on song. So they're just absolutely on top form.
Yeah.
Those two films.
The writing is unbelievable in it. And I think that there's really an element, like the things that you were referring to, where something feels so special about a film where the writers and the directors do things that they know you probably aren't going to notice for the first 5 times that you watch it. Like they do, and he does so much of it. It's so, the attention to detail, particularly in terms of the narrative, is just he cares about it so much, and it's like nobody is going to notice this shit when you first release it. Nobody. And yet the amount of effort and work that he will have put in to make these things happen, even though it doesn't, it doesn't, you could still do exceptionally well without doing any of that if you get the rest of the stuff right. And then he goes the extra mile and then some to do basically Easter eggs.
Oh, yeah, the Easter eggs. So I'll give you examples of how it works in Shaun of the Dead versus Hot Fuzz. Shaun of the Dead, more motifs. So they'll have callbacks to previous gags, which you didn't realise were setups. So, for instance, when Sean and Ed are hanging out and Ed's playing a video game and Sean's going like, oh, top left, oh, reload, blah, blah.
Okay.
They completely repeat that sequence for when they're in the bar, but Ed's the one saying it, Sean's shooting. They say the exact same.
Top left.
Same lines, right? And similarly, at one point, Pete, who is played by Peter Serafinowicz, he comes in and Simon Pegg's character, Sean, goes, I said, leave him alone, which is a callback after Pete's biting into Ed's shoulder at this point.
Yes.
Callback to when he tells him to leave him alone when he's not a zombie. So they'll have little gags like that are repeated.
Yes.
Whereas in Hot Fuzz, they do that as well, but the setup is actually kind of mirrored. So all the things that happen, every single line is important. Like almost across the board, every single line in the first half of Hot Fuzz leads to
something
to a different variation of that later on.
Right. Okay.
Now, that in terms of how impressive that is, that's probably more impressive than how they do it in Shaun of the Dead. Like it's much more considered. However, the reason why Shaun of the Dead slightly is elevated for me is because as a full product, and when I say full product, I mean the story itself, how it completes.
Yes,
it's a bit more satisfying than Hot Fuzz kind of goes similarly to Scott Pilgrim, it kind of goes on a tiny bit.
Okay.
Goes into the fight in the model village, and you're like, the action set piece itself is maybe a teensy bit too drawn out, just a tiny bit. Whereas Shaun of the Dead is almost perfectly.
It's like no loose fat at all.
Like for me, the story is tighter, whereas the dialogue is tighter in Hot Fuzz, but and maybe less important.
It's more creative and challenging to execute.
And one extra point: the proper emotional beats in Shaun of the Dead.
Yes.
Are really good.
Which is hard to get right, I think. I think in a comedy, it can get... There are times when they try to have that kind of sincere moment, and it really doesn't land for me. Like, it happens quite often.
Yeah.
And you are absolutely right. In Shaun of the Dead and in Hot Fuzz as well, it does genuinely resonate with you as the audience when they do it.
The scene where Shaun and I can't remember his girlfriend's name in it, but where they leave Ed, and Ed's basically sacrificed himself because he's been bit, he's not going to survive. Yes. They're going to go up, and he dies, and then Ed farts, and he'd be like, "I'm sorry, Shaun."
Yes.
He's like, "I'm sorry too, mate." No, I'm sorry, Shaun.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's a fart, and that's another callback. But the emotions of that genuinely is I've always felt is top notch. I think they deliver it so well. And I actually really rate Simon Pegg's acting. I think that he is really great.
Yes.
Really is great and underrated.
Totally
the reason why I get Shaun of the Dead number one, on other days I prefer the dialogue of Hot Fuzz, but yeah.
But yeah, okay. Well, listen, if you guys have listened this far, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you on the next one.
Nice one. Cheers, guys.
All right, baby, it's cult time. So, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Just watched it. Brilliant film.
Love it.
Loved it to bits. 85. I've seen the budget. I've seen everything from about 60 million to 85 million. I just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
But what I have found is at box office 50 million. So not that good in the box
grand
office.
Scheme of things. No.
Almost certainly deserved more. But over time, since then, it has really become a cult favorite.
Yeah.
If anything, a very definitive cult favorite movie. So I think it's time to
understand what makes a cult film.
What makes a cult film?
Why do cult films happen? Is this a cult film? I think we've maybe answered.
We'll hold it up to the screen.
So we're gonna go through what are some hallmarks of cult films.
Yes.
Have some bashes at why we think they happen, and then maybe make a statement on Scott Pilgrim's.
We'll see where it goes. We'll see where our feet take us.
Give a list of a few. See how that gets on.
I'll try and give a list of a few. I'll tell you one that's not, right? I'm sorry, Fight Club. People always come out and say, "Oh, Fight Club's a cult movie." We'll hold it up against this, but everybody likes Fight Club. It's not a cult movie.
Well, you actually mentioned a very interesting point. Everybody likes X. So, sounds like you're saying that a cult needs to, by proxy, exclude some people.
Yeah, I think to be a cult movie, you need to have a small, passionate fan base. That's what I think of when I think of a cult anything.
Could it be argued that a cult film could be enjoyed by everyone? It's just not been seen by everyone.
I think it's just one of those classic situations where it's like, let's just get a definition out, and then because it just depends on what the definition of the word cult is. But for me, cult, small, passionate fan base. That makes sense to me.
But not just small, passionate, but small, passionate, and some people just don't get it.
Just
doesn't click for some people.
Yeah.
And that means that it clicks even more for the others.
Exactly.
The ones who get, because they're like, it's us versus them. The other people are wrong.
Scott Pilgrim, I can see why this would fit that description, because there are a lot of things where, although we adore it, I could show this film to my granddad. I don't think he'd think much of it.
He'd be like, why do they jump in the air and fight? And why does the Indian character do a dance?
Yeah, that's it. There are a lot, and you know, this isn't a comment on my granddad. I think there are a lot of people who could watch this film and say, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who could watch, or at least enough people who could watch this film and go, holy shit, this is amazing. This is absolute genius.
Which I think is a key component of the cult aspect. So it not only needs to have a small dedicated following, but the fact that other people can't appreciate it just emblazons the love,
the cultiness
within the following. Yes. Okay. It needs to be like an actual cult itself.
Yeah.
Where the outside is wrong. We are right.
Yeah. I think
Let's all drink bleach.
Yeah. yeah. Okay.
Right.
That is kind of Fight Club-y.
Yeah, okay. But Fight Club.
I tell you what, do
Fight
people
Club's
get a
too
bit
popular.
confused and say that Fight Club... Do people say that Fight Club is a cult favorite? Because I'm sure I've heard that. Have I just completely made that up?
I never have heard people consider Fight Club a cult film. Having said that, I did put like some research into some examples, and
It's come up.
it has come up.
If you're listening, let us know in the comments below. Do you think that Fight Club is a cult film or not?
Yeah.
Or have I just completely made that up? I'm hoping not, given that your research has pulled it up. Okay, yeah, so my point with that then, are people just a little bit confused about cult movie? They think that it doesn't mean cult as in the people who like the movie,
Yeah.
but that it's actually about a cult.
I think that... yeah, to be fair.
Could be where the confusion's coming from.
So I think one of the hallmarks of a cult film has to be poor box office budget performance.
Does it have to... Okay, does it have to make a loss? Like if I spent 1.5 million on a film and it got 50 million, then would that be okay budget box office wise to count as a cult film?
So what did you say? 100 million versus 50?
Scott Pilgrim, we
85,
argue would be a cult film. Made $50 million in the box office, right? But it cost 85 million. So is that a poor box office performance?
Yeah. So poor returns can come in a variety of different ways, can't it? Because you get cult films like The Warriors.
Yes.
Which I haven't looked at the box office numbers for that, but I don't imagine it was like a big budget film that didn't meet expectations, but more this is just any of a million films that have been released.
Yeah.
And it just happens to be that it's been found. And then people are like, wait a minute,
So actually,
this is wild.
So it could have absolutely nothing to do with budget whatsoever, and it isn't. There is an absolute number that your box office has to be below before you can be a cult film. Because if you make $500 million at the box office, I don't care what you tell me, you will never be a cult film.
Which is why I'm just looking at the numbers for Fight Club, right? Made 100.
not a cult
All right,
film.
it didn't make 500 mil, but it made 100 mil on a 60 odd million budget.
But forgetting budget at all, let's say $100 million at the box
$100 million
office. I love people. Enough people like that movie.
Yeah.
You can't call that. It's not a fucking cult movie.
You're right. It's just because there's a cult in it.
People are just
People are like, yeah.
They're
that'll
like, oh, it's a cult movie.
do. Yeah. it's a movie of
Yeah,
cults.
hardly anyone likes that film.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Fight Club.
Fight Club is not a cult film.
Underappreciated.
Change the title of this to Fight Club is not a cult film. Shut up. Stop calling Fight Club a cult film. All right. So we've got underappreciated in its time.
Low box office.
Found through now the interesting thing is, how does it become a film that is considered a cult classic? And that is obviously where there's some subjectivity, right?
I was thinking maybe one of the things that I was thinking was number of reviews, say on IMDb, against the actual score. So if it has, like a very popular movie might have 500,000 reviews on IMDb and it might get 7.8, and you go, that's a good film, and that's done quite well. If you have a film that has 80,000 reviews and it's got like an 8.8, that's a cult. That's a cult film, that.
So we're trying to give some sort of objective ranking, some quantitative
Yeah.
data.
So we're thinking a film that has low box office when it comes out, regardless of budget. Then we're thinking a film that has a high rating on something like IMDb, but a low number of ratings. And or it has to have audiences that that specifically dislike that film.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here's another one then. So people disliking the film, and obviously people really cherishing it. Now, the reasoning behind people cherishing it more than maybe they should, maybe getting to the point that it's a bit weird now, might be a conversation like this. I'm going to have a conversation with you, and we're going to talk about the first Mad Max film, right? Oh, I just was watching this movie that came on the TV the other day. It's like this Australian wasteland film about this cop in leather. Really weird and zany, right? It was a bit of an odd one. It was kind of different to anything I've seen. Person 2. Yeah, I saw that as well. God, that was shit, wasn't it? Yeah. No, it wasn't shit. It was weird and interesting. Defensiveness. If you have a conversation about that, suddenly in my mind, I'm protecting this thing that I found, which was like, maybe I didn't, when I watched it, maybe I didn't think, I love this film, this is the best film I've ever seen.
Yes.
Or I'm immediately invested in what this film is trying to achieve.
Yes.
But I've had a conversation with someone and they have just disagreed with my opinion. Now I'm protecting my opinion, and my opinion has a fire lit under it.
Which you wouldn't do if it was like, you know, really popular fucking Marvel or so. You wouldn't feel quite as passionately about
And that to be honest, that conversation as well is more in your head, isn't it? If you have something which you're like, wait, am I the only person I know who's seen this?
Yeah.
That means that it holds more value.
So I think that pretty much covers a cult film then, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the only other thing in the Scott Pilgrim case to go through is we have been able to see the maturation of what people consider a cult classic. So it may be worth going through what that's looking like now. So that came out to... disappointing box office returns. It did very well in DVD sales, which is part of the reason which it seemed to drive some sort of lasting legacy.
So that's probably a word of mouth sort of thing then, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the people who did see it, it did well critically and at the and with the audience that watched it, they liked it, but just not enough people saw it. Now, not all cult films come out to fanfare from critics.
Yes.
Some are very mixed, like Rocky Horror. I think even Fight Club was a bit, so-so. Donnie Darko, Big Lebowski. So the original Blade Runner, interestingly, was a commercial failure at first, but I don't consider that a cult film. I don't know why that's. Okay. I think that word of mouth spreading, people being defensive about it.
Yes.
And then there seems to be some sort of next unidentifiable step that goes from no one watched this to more people watch this than we realise. In the age of streaming, I know Scott Pilgrim's been on streaming as well. That'll definitely help it.
Yeah. But then if it gets too many people on it, I mean, at some point, if the whole world jumped on board, it's no longer a cult. So at some point, the more people that watch it, the less cult classic it becomes.
Yeah.
Like if Scott Pilgrim ended up just staying on streaming services, it was on Prime, it was on Netflix, it was on all of them for the next 3 years. And by then, every single person watched it and most people liked it, for example, you just couldn't call it a cult anymore.
Well, that's a very interesting question, because if something like Blade Runner was a cult classic that became just a classic, that would mean that there is... Well, firstly, that might not be the case. But going off the fact that we both looked into it, you found Fight Club. I've had Blade Runner come up again.
It just seems so strange to me that
I didn't consider that a cult classic, but maybe it was at one point. But maybe if anyone is listening who remembers Blade Runner coming out and remembers how, in hindsight, it seems to have been more highly regarded, let us know if you think this was ever a cult film. But if it was, let's say this was a cult film, was a cult classic, and then dropped the cult after a certain amount of time, maybe because Ridley Scott continued to have great work and it looked on more favourably, maybe for a million other reasons, maybe because there was a loyal fan base and then just enough people saw it. Is there then a point where all cult films are seen by enough people to no longer be cult?
It's got to be.
I think there is.
But absolutely, yes. If you are listening, let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, have a good one. Bye.
The guy who knows everyone. Oh, this is
Como.
what it is.
My favourite character.
He's so funny. I had a thought on this. So just so that anyone who's listening knows, there is an absolutely hilarious moment where Scott Pilgrim goes up to the guy who knows everybody and shows him effectively a felt tip pen with a circle and some squealy hair and gone, do you know who this is? And he just goes, yes, it's Ramona Flowers.
Yes, that's Ramona Flowers. Someone said she'd be here tonight.
Yes. I was thinking a fun recasting to see in that position. Not that it needs recasting, but Jermaine Clement would be quite funny in that role.
You know, yeah, he would be very good in that, but I just think that guy's so good. And
he nails it.
Funnily enough, like, he reminds me so much of Richard Osman.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, he looks like him, he kind of just appears like him.
Kind of carries a bit like
he's
him.
only in it for a few bits, right? And that is my favourite joke in it. It always has been, the Ramona Flowers one. The other one that I now notice more jokes, obviously, because I've watched it a few times. There's another one he does, like, before Scott Pilgrim interrupts him.
Yes.
Do you know the joke that he says? He's literally talking. You can't really hear it because you're not supposed to be focusing on it. But if you listen, he goes like, and I said to them, you've got a great sound and you should market your sound to deaf people. Then he like interrupts. It's like a non-joke. It's just so good. And then later on, Scott Pilgrim comes back to ask him about Ramona, and he interrupts him and he just goes, ooh.
Yes. I thought that in the film when he made that joke, I thought they might have been suggesting that he was saying that about the sex bombs. Because
I didn't ever think that, but that makes so much sense.
I thought that's what I was saying.
I think like it's pretty much determined that sex bombs are bad up until maybe the end of the film, but before that they're kind of not good. like when what's his face? Do you remember what the lead singer is? The talent, whatever his name is.
Andy or something?
Something the talent.
Could be Andy.
There's a bit where he goes
Probably
like...
not.
where he goes to Ramona, did we suck? And she goes, I don't know, did you? And then she walks onto the bathroom and he goes, she needs to go. She knows that we suck.
yes.
You know what? I think we should just retitle this and release it as the Como Appreciation video because you are in this. You steal the show, actor.
He is brilliant.
Let me find who plays Como.
All right. Well, whilst you're doing that, the stunt doubles for Lucas Lee, Chris Evans' stunt doubles that he fights.
Yep.
Actually, Chris Evans' stunt doubles. They actually do his
movies
cool. with him. Yeah. So the real dudes. I hope you're finding that soon because I'm on my last point already. 7.6.
Nelson Franklin.
Thanks for that.
Nelson Franklin, I just want to speak to you now and say thank you for your work on Scott Pilgrim. It was phenomenal.
Listen, I know you're a regular listener to the Mate Night podcast.
Nelson.
You know about the indisputable patented Mate Night scoring.
You went into the formula.
You were part
the
of the
secret sauce, the 11 herbs and spices.
And you definitely contributed to the higher score. 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb. What do you think?
Makings of a cult film, I'd say. Yeah, 7. You know, our version of 7, as we know, is you should probably watch it sometime in your life.
Yes.
But look, the thing is, it's not for everyone, as we determined. Agreed. For sure, there are people who tried Scott Pilgrim, having heard... You know what I'm going to say here is how hard it is to enjoy something where someone's built it up so much. If someone says to you, this Scott Pilgrim is one of my favourite films and it's amazing for this reason, you go into it wanting to not enjoy it, which I think might have been part of the reason why when I showed you originally, you probably didn't enjoy it quite as much.
Certainly could have been. And I'll tell you what, I'll piggyback off of that. There's nothing worse than when you have something you adore and then you show it to someone and you just spend the whole time thinking like they're not getting it. They should have laughed there. Why did they not laugh there?
Yeah. And you're like, ha ha ha.
This is a funny bit. That was start laughing, you penis.
Yeah, it is tough. I think you just got to say, hey, this is a film I would like you to watch. Let me know what you think, and then see if they get it.
Yeah, this is a rubbish film. But you should watch it anyway. It's trash.
Yeah. What a shit film.
What a terrible film Scott Pilgrim is.
And then they get on side. And then they come back to you and say, I love that film. And it turns out you remove your jumper and you're wearing a Scott Pilgrim top.
And you got a bass guitar under.
And you've dyed your hair green.
Is that a bass guitar in your pants? Yes. All right, well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. We've got new podcasts every Wednesday and Sunday on your favorite podcasting platform and videos 4 days a week on YouTube. Let us know in the comments below if you have anything you'd like to suggest, comment on, etc. We would love to hear it. See you on the next one.
Cheers, Dave. Cheers, Rachel.